The skies above Earth darkened as massive ships, unlike anything humanity had ever seen, pierced through the atmosphere. The ships, sleek, metallic, and adorned with alien insignias, moved with the speed and grace of predatory beasts in the sky. Their descent was calculated, precise, and utterly unstoppable. As the first ship landed in the Nevada desert, a shockwave of displaced air rattled windows and knocked power grids offline for miles. The world held its breath. It was not just a landing, it was an arrival, and the message was clear. A voice, cold and detached, echoed from the ships, speaking in a language that instantly translated to every device across Earth's communication networks. "We are the Valkyries. We come to test your species, prove your strength, or face extinction." The message repeated, looping endlessly, each time more chilling than the last. The Valkyries, a race of highly evolved warrior women from a distant star system known as Thanox, had arrived not with the intention of conquering, but of proving something. It was their way. Over the millennia, they had conquered and tested many species, but none had ever shown the kind of strength that earned their respect. They believed Earth's people, small, fragile, weak, would crumble beneath their challenge. The world's response was immediate but fragmented. Governments scrambled to formulate a unified plan, yet there was no consensus on how to handle this unprecedented threat. The United States deployed its military forces first, sending jets and warships to intercept the alien craft. But the Valkyrie ships were not designed for dogfights. They were designed for superiority. Without firing a single shot, the Valkyries rendered Earth's best weapons obsolete. A single pulse from their ships knocked out global satellites, and every missile launched at them fell harmlessly to the ground, as if the Valkyries had already predicted their every move. In cities across the globe, people gathered in the streets, watching the massive ships hovering ominously above. Fear and awe spread like wildfire. The Valkyries didn't need to invade. Their presence alone was enough to paralyze Earth's defenses. As the military forces regrouped, the Valkyries made their true purpose clear. They weren't interested in negotiations. Instead, they broadcast a series of challenges, each designed to test a different facet of human strength. The strongest will fight. The most cunning will survive. Prove your worth, or be forgotten. Across the globe, human leaders were left scrambling for answers. They tried to negotiate, to plead for mercy, but the Valkyries were impervious to human reasoning. They had come to test the core of humanity, and they would not leave until they had found what they were looking for, proof that Earth's men could match their strength. Among the chaos, Lieutenant Jake Sullivan, a decorated combat veteran, watched the news feeds with a simmering sense of defiance. Test us. Hell, we'll show them what we're made of. He wasn't the only one who felt that way. Across the globe, millions of men felt the same burning desire to stand against the Valkyries. The gauntlet had been thrown, and Earth's pride was on the line. What the Valkyries didn't understand was that humans had something they didn't, an unbreakable will, and that might be the only weapon Earth had left. As the Valkyries' challenge echoed across the planet, the world plunged into chaos. Governments scrambled to respond, but each country faced its own unique crisis. In places like London, Tokyo, and New York, panic set in as civilians poured into the streets, unsure whether they were witnessing the beginning of an invasion or a test that would soon pass. Military leaders, once confident in their technological superiority, now found themselves staring at a challenge that defied logic. There was no playbook for an enemy who could render missiles and fighter jets useless with a single pulse. In Washington, D.C., President Olivia Harris paced the White House Situation Room, her face grim. The Valkyrie ships hovered over the Earth's major capitals, leaving destruction in their wake as they casually dispatched any military forces sent against them. Earth's most powerful militaries had already been humiliated, their weapons defeated with a terrifying ease. There was no immediate plan for victory, no way to fight back, at least not without some serious ingenuity. "We can't afford to sit here and wait for them to make the next move," President Harris said, her voice sharp, eyes never leaving the holographic display in front of her. "They're not here to negotiate, and they won't back down. It's time to act." General Marcus Reed, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stepped forward. His normally unflappable demeanor had cracked. "Madam President, we're facing an enemy that's 20 steps ahead of us. We need time. Time to regroup, rearm, and—" "No, General," Harris interrupted. "We don't have time. They've already humiliated us. If we don't show them that we can fight, we're as good as dead." There was silence in the room, the weight of her words hanging heavy. But it was clear that Earth had no choice. The Valkyries had thrown down the gauntlet, and humanity had to pick it up. In a remote military base in Colorado, Lieutenant Jake Sullivan was already making plans of his own. He'd been following the Valkyries every move, analyzing their patterns, their tactics. The Valkyries weren't just powerful, they were arrogant. They believed that humanity was too weak, too fragmented to mount any real defense. Jake's mind raced, thinking of ways to exploit that. He knew that Earth's survival depended on them doing the unexpected, on finding a way to outsmart the Valkyries, to show them that their strength alone wasn't enough to break the human spirit. "We need to get them where it hurts," Jake said, addressing a small team of military strategists and intelligence officers. "The Valkyries are using their advanced tech to humiliate us, but they're overestimating their own power. They think they can break us by force, but they're wrong. It's not about brute strength, it's about survival." A tech specialist, a young woman named Claire Anderson, looked up from her terminal. "We've been studying their tech. It's far beyond ours, but there's one thing we've noticed. It's all based on energy fields. If we could disrupt those fields, we might have a chance to level the playing field." Jake nodded. "Exactly. We're not going to beat them in a head-to-head fight, but we can find their weakness. We'll force them to respect us, or we'll give them no choice but to leave." Claire's eyes lit up with determination. "We'll need to move fast. But if this works, we can take down their ship's shields. It's our only shot." Jake stood tall, a fire in his eyes. "Then let's take it. Humanity may not have the technology they do, but we've got something they don't. We've got heart." While the Valkyries watched from above, utterly confident in their superiority, the human resistance was already plotting their next move. The countdown had begun. Earth's last stand was about to unfold. And Jake Sullivan would lead them, no matter what the cost. The Valkyries' challenge was clear. Humanity's strongest must come forward to face them in a series of trials, a brutal gauntlet designed to test the limits of human endurance, strength, and intellect. Earth's leaders, scrambling for any chance to salvage their dignity, agreed to the terms. But no one knew how to approach the enemy that had so easily incapacitated the world's greatest military forces. The Valkyries had demonstrated their overwhelming power, leaving Earth's military forces humiliated. Now, the gauntlet wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for Earth's very pride. In a bold and daring move, Jake Sullivan, the battle-hardened lieutenant from Colorado, stepped forward. He was a decorated war hero, but he wasn't the biggest or the strongest. What he had, though, was an unshakable will. He knew humanity's best hope lay in proving to the Valkyries that they were not the mindless, weak creatures they assumed. And he knew that the trials, while designed to break them, could also be their opportunity to expose the Valkyries' arrogance. The location of the first trial was set in a massive, open arena just outside of what used to be Paris. The Valkyries stood atop towering, alien structures, watching from above, their eyes glowing with a predatory gleam. They were confident, too confident. Jake was not alone. His team of soldiers, including the fiery and resourceful Sarah Harper, a top-tier sniper, and Jason Carter, a former Special Forces operative known for his stealth, joined him in the arena. The rules were simple: complete each challenge or face extinction. But no one was under any illusion that the Valkyries' idea of challenging was anything but cruel. The first test was a fight to the death, a battle against the Valkyries' most seasoned warrior. Jake and his team stood at one end of the arena, facing an armoured Valkyries named Ralka. Her appearance alone was enough to send shivers down any human's spine. Tall, with crimson armour, and a blade that seemed to shimmer with unnatural energy. Ralka stepped forward, her movements fluid, as though she was dancing rather than fighting. She surveyed her opponents with contempt. "Is this the best you can do, humans? You truly believe your pitiful strength will stand against mine?" Jake's heart pounded, but he didn't flinch. He knew this was just the beginning. The fight was not just about strength, it was about proving resilience. The trial began with a sudden explosive rush. Ralka lunged toward them, her blade flashing through the air with terrifying speed. The human team scattered, relying on strategy rather than power to survive. Sarah, taking advantage of her sniper skills, found a perch high in the arena and fired a precise shot aimed at Ralka's exposed side. The Valkyries warrior grunted, but her armour absorbed most of the impact, leaving only a shallow wound. Jason, using his agility and training, distracted Ralka with a series of rapid strikes from his knife. It was clear that against a creature like her, the humans stood no chance in a direct confrontation. Yet Jake's tactics were something the Valkyries didn't anticipate. He was unpredictable. He sprinted toward the center of the arena, baiting Ralka to follow. As the Valkyries warrior charged, Jake led her into a trap. Using the environment to his advantage, he triggered a series of mechanisms hidden in the arena's architecture: force fields, hidden barriers, and pressure plates that caused obstacles to appear in Ralka's path. For a moment, the Valkyries warrior hesitated, visibly frustrated by the limitations of her surroundings. This was the human advantage: adaptability. Where the Valkyries relied on sheer power, Jake and his team relied on cleverness, using the terrain to their advantage and forcing Ralka to fight on their terms. Ralka, growing increasingly furious, swung her sword with deadly intent. But Jake, with a surge of adrenaline, dodged her strike, using his agility to grab a nearby weapon, an energy blade scavenged from a previous test. In a swift motion, he deflected Ralka's sword and landed a clean cut along her armour. Ralka staggered back, eyes narrowing. She had underestimated them. The human team had made their first move, and for the first time, the Valkyries were uncertain. They had not broken the humans, they had shown them that they could fight back. The Valkyries' confidence faltered just slightly. The test wasn't over, but the Valkyries were beginning to understand something about humanity that they hadn't anticipated. Earth's men were not easily broken, and this was only the first trial. The crowd of Valkyries warriors watched in stunned silence as Jake Sullivan and his team emerged from the first trial battered, but not broken. Ralka, the Valkyries warrior who had been their opponent, now lay wounded on the arena floor, her pride shattered more than her body. The humans had shown something that no one had expected: resilience. For the first time there was doubt in the air. The Valkyries warriors, so accustomed to swift and overwhelming victories, exchanged glances. Some of them whispered to one another, while others stood silent, their eyes locked on the humans. In that moment, Jake realized that they had done more than survive. They had planted the seed of uncertainty in the Valkyries' minds. But that wasn't enough. He knew they had to push forward. One victory wasn't going to end the trials. It would just make the Valkyries more determined to crush them. It was time for a new strategy. "I've got an idea," Jake said quietly, as he gathered his team in the shadows of the arena's edge. The Valkyries were resetting the stage for the next trial, but Jake knew their confidence was faltering. "We're not going to win with brute strength, but we can win with tactics. We're going to turn the arena against them, make them play by our rules." Sarah Harper, her expression weary but determined, nodded. "You're thinking what I'm thinking." Jake smiled grimly. "Exactly. We need to make them underestimate us completely." The next challenge was a test of intellect and ingenuity. The Valkyries led the humans to a massive underground labyrinth, its walls lined with strange, glowing symbols and pressure-sensitive floors. The task was simple on the surface: navigate the labyrinth, find the key, and escape before the time ran out. But Jake knew it wasn't going to be that easy. The Valkyries had designed this challenge with one thing in mind: puzzle solving under pressure. As the team descended into the labyrinth, the walls immediately began shifting, trapping them in a maze of twisting corridors. Each turn presented new dangers: deadly traps triggered by wrong steps, areas where gravity fluctuated, and walls that seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. "We've got to stay calm," Jake said, his voice steady. "Stick together. We don't have to be faster than them. We just have to outthink them." Jason Carter was the first to spot something strange. "Look at this," he said, crouching near a set of glowing symbols on the floor. "These markings, they are repeating." Jake moved over and crouched beside him. "It's a pattern," he said. "They're trying to trick us into taking the wrong route." They quickly deciphered the symbols, realizing that the maze was not just a physical challenge. It was designed to test their ability to read and adapt. The Valkyries had underestimated human resourcefulness. While the labyrinth shifted and changed around them, Jake and his team relied on strategy and teamwork to find their way through. Sarah and Claire, who had been quietly studying the symbols, noticed the frequency with which certain patterns reappeared. They worked together to mark the correct pathways, avoiding traps and dangerous dead ends. Jason, using his stealth training, scouted ahead, alerting them to hidden dangers. The team's pace quickened as they grew more confident. But the Valkyries were watching from above, their eyes cold and assessing. "They think they can outsmart us." Ralka, having recovered from her earlier defeat, sneered. "Let's see how they handle what's next." At that moment, the ground beneath their feet began to rumble. Jake turned sharply, but before he could give an order, the labyrinth's walls began to close in on them. It wasn't just the maze that was changing, it was the very structure of the arena itself. They had triggered the Valkyries' final obstacle, a shifting, living labyrinth designed to trap them in a maze of walls that could close at will. Jake's heart raced. Time was running out, and the walls were closing in. But they had one thing the Valkyries couldn't predict: their unity and their will to survive. "We move as one," Jake commanded. "No hesitation. We break through together." The team, working with brutal efficiency, used every ounce of their cunning and strength to push through the closing walls. As the time ticked down, they finally reached the center of the labyrinth and unlocked the final door, emerging victorious in a burst of triumph. They had beaten the Valkyries at their own game. The Valkyries were no longer laughing. Jake's gambit had paid off. This time, it wasn't about strength, but about the human ability to adapt and overcome. As they emerged from the labyrinth, battered but victorious, Jake knew that the Valkyries' arrogance had cost them dearly. For the first time, they weren't just looking at humans as prey. They were starting to see them as something much more dangerous, worthy opponents. And the real battle was only just beginning. The Valkyries, stunned by the unexpected victories of the human team, gathered in the high chambers of their command ship. Ralka and Valkyria, both seasoned warriors of the Thanox system, paced restlessly. The human resistance was proving more than capable of holding their own. And with each passing trial, the Valkyries were growing increasingly uneasy. They had come to Earth expecting easy prey, but instead, they were faced with an enemy that fought not just with strength, but with intelligence and spirit. "We underestimated them," Ralka growled, her eyes burning with frustration. "They don't fight like other species. They adapt. They learn." Valkyria, the Valkyries commander who had led the initial landing, stood quietly by the window, her gaze locked on the distant human forces gathering below. She had watched the humans progress from the start, and for the first time, a strange feeling, something akin to respect, began to creep into her heart. Jake Sullivan and his team had fought with tenacity and ingenuity, and each victory made it harder to deny that they had proven themselves as worthy adversaries. "Perhaps this isn't just a test," Valkyria said, her voice low. "Perhaps the humans are more than just weak creatures after all." Ralka turned sharply, her expression dark. "What are you suggesting? That we abandon the mission? We are the Valkyries. We conquer. We win. Anything else is failure." Valkyria stepped closer, her stance resolute. "What if victory means something more than just destruction? What if humanity is worth saving, worth—" "Enough," Ralka snapped, silencing her. "You are weakening. We will proceed with the final test. The humans will fall." But Valkyria couldn't shake the doubt gnawing at her. There was something different about this planet, about these people. She had witnessed the humans' struggles, their unwavering resolve, and she couldn't help but wonder if she was part of something larger, something that could change the very nature of their warlike civilization. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Jake Sullivan's team was feeling the pressure mount. They had passed every trial so far, but they knew that the Valkyries weren't going to let them win without one last, final test. The word came down quickly. The ultimate challenge would take place on an isolated island, a volcanic archipelago in the Pacific Ocean. The Valkyries had promised something lethal, the ultimate test of survival. But Jake wasn't just worried about the Valkyries' cruelty. He had other concerns. Valkyria, who had shown signs of hesitation, was becoming a wild card. Was she still fully loyal to the Valkyries' cause, or had she begun to doubt her mission? Jake gathered his team in their operations room to discuss the situation. Sarah Harper, still visibly exhausted from the last trial, was the first to speak. "You're thinking what I'm thinking, aren't you?" she said, glancing at Jake. "Valkyria is playing both sides. She's starting to question this whole thing." Jason Carter, always more cynical, frowned. "You think she'll turn on us? We can't trust any of them, especially not after everything they've done to us." "I'm not saying we trust her," Jake replied, his voice firm. "But I do think she's questioning the Valkyries' methods. If we can use that to our advantage, we might have a shot." There was a tense silence. Claire Anderson, the team's tech expert, spoke up from the corner. "We can't count on Valkyria changing sides. But if we can gain her trust, she might give us the intel we need to outsmart the Valkyries in the final test." Jake looked at each of his team members, his mind racing. The odds were slim. They could fight their way out of the final challenge, but without an edge, without something to turn the tide, they would be wiped out. The Valkyries were playing to win, and they had every resource at their disposal. But so did they. Humanity's greatest asset wasn't in its strength or its technology, it was in its ability to *adapt*, to turn the odds in its favour. "We need to get inside their heads," Jake said, his eyes narrowing with determination. "We can't beat the Valkyries by brute force, but if we play the game the right way, we'll find a way to win." And with that, a plan began to form. It was a dangerous gamble, but one that might give them the one advantage they desperately needed. If Valkyria was still undecided about her loyalty, Jake had to exploit that doubt. If he could, it could be the key to surviving what was to come. The volcanic archipelago in the Pacific Ocean stood ominously beneath the blood-red sky, a fitting battleground for the final trial. The island chain, surrounded by boiling waters and jagged cliffs, was a place of fire and stone, an environment that would test the endurance of even the hardiest warriors. It was the perfect stage for the Valkyries to break humanity once and for all. Jake Sullivan and his team had been briefed on the mission: survive. But surviving the Valkyries' final trial would require more than just strength or intellect. It would require everything they had learned about each other, about the Valkyries, and about themselves. They were being pushed to the edge, and Jake knew that this final challenge could very well be the end of everything, or the beginning of something far more dangerous. "We can't win this by simply fighting," Jake said, his voice resolute as he addressed his team on the transport shuttle. "This isn't just about survival. It's about proving that humanity can endure. We've shown them our strength, and now we show them our will. No matter what comes next, we stick together." Sarah Harper, ever the pragmatist, nodded. "I'm in, but we need a plan. The Valkyries won't make it easy on us." Jason Carter, who'd been quiet up until now, cracked a grin. "It's always easy until we start messing with their game." Jake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They were about to face the hardest trial yet, one that would push them physically and mentally. The Valkyries' final test wasn't just a gauntlet of physical combat or puzzles. It was designed to strip away the very core of who they were. It was a test of survival against nature itself. As their shuttle landed, the air was thick with heat and the smell of sulfur. The volcanic island loomed ahead, its jagged peaks smoking in the distance. On the shore, Valkyria stood, her figure silhouetted against the flickering horizon. She was alone. "Welcome to the final test," she said, her voice surprisingly calm, even welcoming. "The island is full of hazards, wild beasts, unstable terrain, and the constant threat of volcanic eruptions. Your objective is simple: reach the summit before time runs out. Survive the island's trials or perish. The clock begins now." Jake narrowed his eyes. He had anticipated another direct combat challenge. Instead, they were being forced into an environment where every step could mean death. There would be no second chances. "What are you not telling us?" Sarah asked, her sharp eyes steadying Valkyria. The tension between the Valkyries leader and the human team had been building for days, and Jake could sense that Sarah's suspicions were right. Valkyria wasn't entirely loyal to the Valkyries' cause. There was something more here, something she hadn't revealed. Valkyria hesitated, her gaze flicking to the horizon, then back to Jake. "The island isn't just about testing your survival skills. It's about showing your resilience. You think you can survive the violence, the environment, the danger. The final test is about one thing: choice. If you truly wish to prove your worth, you must choose the hardest path. Because that is the only way to survive the Valkyries. Jake didn't need to hear more. He understood immediately what Valkyries was suggesting. The Valkyries had been pushing them, testing them at every turn, not just with physical strength, but with their ability to make difficult choices, to outsmart them at every opportunity. The final test wasn't about physical might, it was about choosing to survive at all costs. The ground beneath their feet rumbled. A low, foreboding roar echoed from the depths of the island. Valkyrisa's voice cut through the tension. The island will test everything you have. The longer you wait, the harder it will be. The beasts, the terrain, the fires, they won't wait for you. But choose wisely. The path to the summit will not be easy. As Valkyrisa turned and disappeared into the dense jungle, the team stood in silence, each member digesting the gravity of her words. They didn't have the luxury of time. They had to move, to choose their path, and to face the unknown dangers of the island head-on. "Let's move," Jake ordered, his tone decisive. "Stay sharp. We're not just surviving, we are winning this." With that, the team set off into the jungle, knowing that this was their final chance. The island was not just a physical battleground. It was a crucible, meant to forge them into something more than they had been before. They would either leave as survivors or never leave at all. But Jake Sullivan had already made his choice. They would win. The jungle was suffocating, thick with humidity and the oppressive heat that radiated from the island's volcanic core. The air buzzed with the distant growls of creatures, the rustling of unseen predators in the underbrush. Every step they took seemed to make the ground tremble beneath them. Jake Sullivan, Sarah Harper, Jason Carter, and Claire Anderson moved cautiously, their eyes darting from side to side, each of them sensing that they were being watched. The terrain's shifting. Sarah muttered under her breath, her sniper instincts on high alert. "It's like the whole island's alive." Jake nodded grimly. The Valkyries wouldn't make it easy. Stay close and watch for signs of movement. The team had been navigating the dense foliage for what felt like hours when they heard it, a low, guttural growl reverberating from deep within the jungle. They all froze, instinctively reaching for their weapons. Jason's eyes narrowed, scanning the trees. "Something's moving out there," he whispered. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them shook with a violent force. The trees swayed as a massive, serpentine creature emerged from the foliage, its eyes glowing an unnatural yellow, and its jagged, scale-covered body undulating like a giant snake. The creature's teeth, black as obsidian, were like daggers, and its long tail whipped through the air, sending debris flying. "It's a barrack," Claire gasped, her voice laced with awe and fear. "I've read about these, a predatory species native to volcanic planets. These things hunt in packs." There was no time to think. The creature lunged, its mouth opening wide, revealing rows of teeth meant to shred through bone. Jake acted instantly, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her out of the way as the barrack snapped its jaws shut with a deafening crack. "Move," Jake yelled. "We don't fight it. We run." But the beast wasn't giving them a choice. It roared, shaking the ground as it swung its massive tail, narrowly missing Jake as he dove to the side. Jason fired a burst from his rifle, hitting the creature in the shoulder, but the shots barely seemed to faze it. "Damn it, it's too tough," Jason shouted. "We need a distraction, something to draw it away." Claire, ever resourceful, began scanning the jungle around them. Her fingers flew over the control panel of her wrist-mounted tech device, sending a signal pulse toward a cluster of nearby rocks. The moment the pulse hit, the rocks exploded in a loud bang, sending a plume of dust and debris into the air. The barrack recoiled, its senses momentarily disoriented by the noise. Jake saw the opening. "Now, go," he ordered, grabbing Claire's arm and pulling her forward. The team broke into a sprint, their only objective now to outrun the beast before it recovered. The jungle was alive with danger, but Jake knew they couldn't afford to be distracted. Time was running out. They still had to reach the summit. If they didn't, they would fail. The Valkyries had made it clear. The test wasn't just about surviving the creatures or the elements. It was about choosing how they survived. They couldn't let themselves be consumed by fear. They had to keep moving. Suddenly, another tremor shook the earth, but this one was different. The ground cracked open in several places, revealing a bright, molten orange glow beneath the surface. "The volcano's waking up," Sarah shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to move now." Jake didn't hesitate. The path to the summit had just become far more dangerous, and the island itself was turning against them. But this was the Valkyries' final test. It wasn't just about battling beasts or surviving the environment. It was about choosing to fight through the chaos, to keep going even when the odds were stacked impossibly high. The team moved faster now, leaping over chasms that were quickly opening up in the ground and dodging falling rocks as the eruption began in earnest. But they had learned something crucial during the past trials. The Valkyries believed they could be broken by fear. Jake's team had proven time and again that they could endure, and in that moment, with the ground shaking beneath them and the island's fiery rage all around, they knew that their true strength lay not in fighting the impossible, but in choosing to face it head-on. As they pushed forward, hearts pounding and adrenaline surging, Jake didn't just see a path ahead, he saw the future. The Valkyries' arrogance was their greatest flaw. Humanity might have been small, fragile and underestimated, but they had something the Valkyries had yet to comprehend, a fierce, unyielding will. And that would be their weapon. With the volcano erupting in the distance, the summit within sight, Jake's team made their final push. They weren't just going to survive this island. They were going to conquer it. The volcanic island trembled beneath their feet as Jake Sullivan's team sprinted toward the summit. The air was thick with the acrid scent of sulfur, and the sky above was a hellish red, streaked with fiery embers. The ground cracked open in violent fissures, sending plumes of ash and steam into the air. The volcano, once dormant, was now a living, roaring beast, much like the Valkyries who had set the trial in motion. With every step, the team fought through exhaustion and fear. They had been pushed to their absolute limits, their bodies battered by the island's savage conditions. But it wasn't just their physical endurance that had been tested. It was their resolve, their willingness to keep moving forward, no matter the cost. This final trial, more than anything else, had stripped away all pretenses of survival. The Valkyries believed they could break them with sheer force of nature. They were wrong. Just a little further, Jake urged, his voice hoarse. "We're almost there. Keep going." The team didn't need further motivation. Sarah, Jason, Claire, and even the usually quiet Carter pushed forward with renewed determination. Behind them, the barrack beast had retreated, finally driven away by the volcanic eruption. But ahead of them loomed something even more dangerous, the summit where the Valkyries awaited. As they reached the final stretch, a sudden silence fell over the island. The rumbling of the volcano, the screams of distant creatures, all of it ceased. It was as though the island had held its breath. At the peak, standing beneath an ancient stone archway, was Valkyria. Her eyes, once cold and calculating, now held something else, an emotion Jake couldn't quite place. Was it admiration, pity, or perhaps something even more dangerous, respect? "You made it," Valkyria said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "I didn't think you would." Jake's chest heaved with the effort of the climb, but his eyes were sharp, focused. "We're not done yet." Valkyria stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "You've passed the trials, survived the beasts, endured the environment, but you haven't passed my test yet." The team tensed. They had fought through everything the island had thrown at them, and now they were being told they had failed. "What do you mean?" Sarah demanded, her voice cold. "We survived. We reached the summit. What else is there?" Valkyria's lips curled into a faint smile, but it was not a smile of triumph. It was a smile of something darker. The final test wasn't just about survival, human. It was about choosing what you value most. The Valkyries have always valued power, strength. But your kind, she trailed off, her gaze shifting to the fiery horizon. "You value something else, something I didn't understand until now." Jake's pulse quickened. "And what's that?" Valkyria's eyes flicked to the distant volcano, then back to the team. "You value each other. Your will to survive is not individual. It is collective. That is what makes you dangerous. You fight for each other, even when it seems hopeless. That's why I chose you." Jake's mind raced. He had suspected Valkyria's growing uncertainty, but hearing her say it aloud sent a ripple of realization through him. The Valkyries were not just testing their strength, they were testing their unity, and they had passed. "But we haven't won yet," Valkyria continued, her voice hardening. "There's still one final choice to make. The fate of your planet, of humanity, rests in your hands." She motioned toward a strange device at her side, its glowing core pulsating ominously. "This is a device that can either destroy your world or save it. If you press this button, Earth will be wiped clean of life, just as we intended. But if you refuse, you will be allowed to live, to rebuild, and to prove yourselves worthy of the universe's respect. The choice is yours." A hushed silence fell over the group. The moment of truth had arrived. For all the trials, for all the battles they had fought, it all came down to this single decision. Could they trust Valkyria? Would she honor her word? Jake stepped forward, his face grim but resolute. "You think we destroy our own planet, that we give in to fear or power. You've learned nothing. We'll rebuild. We'll show you who we are." Valkyria's eyes narrowed as she studied Jake. A bold statement, but words alone won't change the course of the galaxy. Jake's voice hardened with finality. "No, actions will. And humanity's actions are just beginning." In that moment, the volcano rumbled again, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was a sign of the island's acceptance of their choice. The earth beneath them shifted, and the strange device that Valkyria had shown them powered down, its core losing its menacing glow. The Valkyries had underestimated humanity, thinking that they could be broken by fear, by power, or by a simple test of survival. They had failed to see what made humans truly dangerous. Their unyielding will to fight for what they loved, their unbreakable unity, and their ability to turn any challenge into an opportunity. Valkyria stood silent for a long moment before finally lowering her head, a silent acknowledgement of Jake's words. "Humanity has proven its worth," she said. "Perhaps we underestimated you. The galaxy will hear of this." As Jake looked back at his team, his friends, his brothers and sisters in arms, he knew the battle for Earth was not over. But they had won something far more important today. They had won the respect of the Valkyries. And with that, humanity's true future had begun.